Yeah, we are live, and I just need to control that volume. And so, yeah. So this verse number 20. We had finished in the 14th chapter, Gunatraya Vibhaga Yoga. We had finished a great deal. We were about to finish the chapter. We were stuck in the last verse. That was the only thing that was left, and we will do that, and then we'll make progress further. But before we sort of go forward, um, we'll sort of look at this particular verse and what does it mean and how he sort of makes sense of it. Before we start this verse, to put it in a context, you remember that Arjuna has asked him a few questions. What are the markers, what are the indications for a person to realize that he has successfully overcome the pressure, the influence, the debilitating influence of the three gunas working on him? That is the first question. The second one is kimacharaha. How does it behave? How does it relate to the external world? The third question is even simpler, but it's the most difficult question. How does one reach that stage called gunatita avastha? Because Bhagavan has kind of indicated that once a person is able to overcome the game of these three gunas, he is at the penultimate stage of self realization. And if he can cross the last hurdle, he meditates on these Vedanta Vakyas, he very quickly will realize me. And therefore, he says just before this, because the details I don't want to go, the Gunatista Avastha he mentioned, Udasina Vadasina Guni Yona Vicharyate. These are the markers, symptoms. Gunaha Vartante Ityevam Yovattishtati Nengate. He is not disturbed, and he realizes that these thoughts and actions and everything are modified or are emerging as a result of some guna working in him. Now, there is a very nice trick here which you can employ to control or to sort of enhance our performance in spiritual terms. Whenever there is for example, there are so many management gurus and so many spiritual counselors all over the place, whether it's YouTube or Facebook, everywhere they're there. They are trying to sell their own ideas. But Bhagavad Gita says you don't want to go anywhere, just focus on what I'm saying, Bhagavan says. And what is that? He's saying whenever there is a particular thing which is emerging in you which you do not like, ask yourself, which guna do you think is associated with this? Which guna do you think is creating this? Then you can recognize which guna is overall dominating over you. And then accordingly, you can look at different aspects of your life and you can analyze to reconfirm, is it a sporadic one-time eruption of a guna and its game, or it is becoming endemic, or it has become a pandemic in you? Whether it has taken full control over your body, your mind, or it's only a local problem. Is it a neurosis or it's a psychosis? Is it affecting only one aspect of your thought process of the whole mental universe, or it is creating a general dysfunction, as they call in psychology? That will become a psychosis, which will require some medication, some medical intervention. If it's just a mild neurosis, they do counseling, they try to help. Now, this is the point Bhagavan is raising, that we can use this word of Bhagavan that he is not involved in any of these, because he verily realizes that I am the self. I have already listened to Bhagavan in chapter number 3 and 4 and 5, and I know how to meditate chapter 6 and 7 and 8 and 9. And then the most critical thing, which is chapter 13. So I know all the secrets, that I'm the self, and the names and forms, these are not me, these are mine. These are not me. These are mine because out of ignorance I accept them to be associated with me. Necessarily I'm none of these. So this is one particular thing. So Bhagavan mentions what are the lingers, and then he's another marker he's mentioning sama dukkha sukha swastaha, all the time atmastaha, and therefore he is not bothered whether he's happy or sad. Samalostas makanchanaha. They're kind of having an attitude of equanimity, whether it's normal days or hard days or lazy days. He's not much bothered. Tulya Priya Priya, and whether something he likes or dislikes it comes his way. And Dhiras Tulya Nindya Atma Sanstuti. Somebody is praising him or is shouting at him or criticizing him. And then similarly, this, apamana or upahasa or puraskara or tiraskara is kind of absolutely not. Manapamana is non-verbal show of disrespect, as the Tikakara, as I mentioned. Tulya. And Tulya Mitra Ripakyayoha. Similarly, somebody is an adversary or somebody is friendly to him. He is not perturbed, not excited to meet a friend, and not perturbed to, just have to do his duty vis-a-vis an enemy. He meets a person sitting next to him in a flight with whom he had a fight a few years back. He is not bothered. A normal guy would be, but he's a student of Gita, so he's not bothered. Sarvarambha Parityagi, no, not having big plans doesn't mean that he's not going to do his duty, but he is not anymore in the game of having Sankalpa Vikalpa. He does his work, but he is already a Karma Yogi. So Sarvarambha Parityagi is the ultimate stage, but whatever duties he has, he does them. But he's not having big plans, he's not having monorajyas and stuff like that. Gunatita Saucheta, but he has to genuinely go and establish himself at that ultimate stage. Now, just before the last verse, Bhagavan says in the penultimate verse, Mam cha yo abhyavicharena bhakti yogena sevate. I mean, this is a very, very important verse which is given a lot of importance, especially by the Vaishnava and the Saiva cults. That look here, you may be a great student of Vedanta, you may be very smart with the Shastras, you may be a very intellectually inclined person with a lot of, you have a smart intellect, you can decipher the meaning of any text, you can explain it to others as well. But if you are not focused in your attention on Bhagavan, the divine grace, the progress is going to slow down. That's what the purpose of this verse is. Say the great saviors of the, the Vaishnava and the Saiva Paramparas, the Vedantins, kind of explain them that this bhajana, this bhakti is always having the Nirakara Brahma in mind, and you have this particular orientation of complete truthfulness and looking at everything as Maya, but you are not fighting with Maya, but you're focusing on the adhisthana of Maya. Like, for example, we enter a room and there is the appearance of a snake, but instead of trying to fight the snake or kill the snake, the intelligent guy tries to find out what it is all about. And he finds out it's a rope. So he doesn't try to kill the snake. Bhagavan says that you focus on me. So Gunan Sama Atityan. So he sort of overcomes, comprehensively beats them. He doesn't kill the snake. He sees that as a rope. The sansara excites us and frightens us because we are overwhelmed by the duality, the diversity of it, the enchantments, the promises, the aspirations. We project onto it and we think these are going to be fulfilled by the sansara, or there are dangers, there are insecurities, there are emergencies that we see in the sansara. At the root of all that is our mental unsettled nature, because we are not looking at the Adhisthana. Now, somebody might ask us one question: okay, you are a good Vedanti, you are in a lifeboat, and that ship is going to shrink or is going to get drowned. How do you look at it? How do you manage yourself? Or true Vedanti will absolutely not be bothered. He'll just be quietly sitting. If he survives, fine, because of Prarabdha he would. If it doesn't, that's also fine, because he's constantly doing his sadhana, and Bhagavan says, in whatever condition you are, if you're fully focused on me, if you get terminated, no problem, because you're not going anywhere. You're going to come back to start your sadhana again. If you don't come back, that is moksha. That means you have done your sadhana very well. Samatitya etan brahma bhuyaya kalpate. Then he sort of attains that brahma bhava. He gets that self-realization. So whether we drop this body or not, it absolutely shouldn't trouble us. Having said this, in the verse number 26, Bhagavan is saying something even more interesting, because he's trying to explain, why should you focus on me? Why should you do bhakti? Why should you be completely attentive to me? He's giving Tatra Hetu Maha. If we look at our great Madhusudana Saraswati, he's saying this bhakti that Bhagavan is prescribing is the way out, not as a, it's like the last medicine that you have to take to get fully immunized from any kind of infection. You want to get that final freedom from a certain health condition. So you need to take a lot of things. It's medicine only doesn't work. You have to do several other things. But there would be one particular antibiotic or antiviral or anything which will bring an end to that infection. But simultaneously, you have to take good food, which is our dharma or papa punya, good behavior, all that Bhagavan has mentioned. We have to take good food and take sleep and listen to what the doctor said, and also get the blessings of others, which means behave nicely with others, and take nutritious food. Maybe sit in the sun for a while, do a little exercise, keep the mind happy. Having done all that, you have to finish the medicine course, and this is the last leg of it. Bhagavan talks about bhakti, and then he says, he explains why is it so important that you completely focus on that ultimate truth called the Brahman, that is me, Lord Krishna here. Brahmano hi pratishtaham amritasya vyas avyayasya cha sasvatasya cha dharmasya sukhasya ekantikasya. Brahmano hi pratishta aham amritasya. I am the foundation of that Brahma Bhuyaya Kalpate. That is what he had mentioned in the previous verse. So in this verse, he's saying, Brahmano hi pratishta aham. I am the foundation. I am. That is Lord Krishna. That's what he's saying, right? So it looks like Bhagavan Krishna, the Avatara, is telling us that he is the final limiting, defining, and founding father of what we call the Nirvikalpa Brahma, and we are going to get that Brahma Prakti. But he's saying, I am the foundation of that Brahma. Come to me. It's like there's a very powerful local politician who has a hold over the chief minister or the prime minister, who tells you that if you do not please me, you're not going to go anywhere. Is he saying like that? That we will see in the explanation. It's not exactly like that. Some of the Bhakti Marga people might talk like that, but here it's all Advaita Vedanta. Okay? Brahmano hi pratishtaham amritasya vyayasya cha. Of the Amrita and Avyaya, that is that Brahman, the Brahman which is Avyaya and Amrita, Tasya Aham Adhishtanam. And then what? Pratishtha. Saswatasya, and that Brahman which is Saswata, which is, it's Nitya. There is no end to it on the time scale. There is no beginning, no end. That is Saswat. Cha Dharamasya. Now you would ask this question, is it about dharma? Is the Brahma dharma? Is it supposed to be nirdharmaka? I mean, it doesn't have nirguna, nirakara, niskala, you said all that. Why have you mentioned the word dharma here? That will be explained. You get him through dharma, and therefore he's mentioned dharma. And what kind of dharma? Puja, karma kanda? No, that is for antakarana suddhi. That is for swarga prapti. Here the word dharma is mentioned. Dharma is the upaya, Brahman is the upeya, the Brahma Jnana is the destination, and this is the path. And this path of dharma, which is mentioned here, is not that Mimamsa Paribhasita Dharma, but it is Jnana Lakshana Dharma. That is what is about Jnana Nishtha. That is the Dharma that we are talking about here. Sukhasya, and also that Brahman is verily Sachidananda Rupa, and therefore he is also, that Brahman is also been referred to as Sukhasya. Ekantikasya, and we'll have some interesting discussion why the word Ekantika is mentioned. Otherwise, we have talked about Sukha in many ways in Bhagavad Gita so far, isn't it? We have talked about Shreyascha, Preyascha, going to Kathopanishad. We have talked right now about Sama, Dukkha, Sukha, Swastha. So he has a lot of sukhas and dukkhas which he experiences. We just talked about it, didn't we? And therefore, Bhagavan says, Aikantika Sukha. That means where there is no variation, there is no alteration, and this is definitely, or I mean, this is the supreme bliss that one can experience. He's not talking about sukha, which is by nature sense pleasure, or the sukha that you experience because you get a very kind, affectionate phone call from your boss, or a very respectful call from your child, or your student, or your staff, or a word of praise from your friend. It's not that kind of sukha. This sukha, or maybe you make a lot of profit, this sukha is ekantika. It's completely superior, it's completely different, and there is no two of it. Ekantikas, yeah, and we'll discuss why he is saying all that. Okay. Now, first, there is a bit of Sankara Bhashya, and because we're doing it, we'll pay attention to the Sankara Bhashya. But as soon as we have done it, we'll start doing the Madhusudana Bhashya, which to my mind very nicely sort of captures it, both the Bhakti Marga and the Jnana Marga, and concludes it in a very nice way. Brahmana Paramatmanaha hi yasmat pratishtha aham pratitishthati asmin iti pratishtha aham pratyagatma. Now, Bhagavan just mentioned earlier, Mamcha yo avyavicharena bhakti yogena sevate. The one who meditates on me, avyavicharene, doesn't mean that he thinks about me for 5 minutes, 2 minutes, 2 hours. He's not talking about japa tapa dhyana. He's talking about a mode of consciousness where 24/7 we are focused on the truth. Doesn't mean we are meditating all the time. Our very life is organized around that particular truth, which is of Advaita Vedanta, that Atma is only truth, the rest of it is an appearance, is Vyavaharika Satya. But each movement of our brain, each movement of our hands and legs, whatever we do, are kind of informed by that, tempered by this wisdom that we inherit from the Bhagavad Gita. That is the meaning of it. Doesn't mean that you have to abandon everything and sit in meditation. I think that will make life avoidable. No, one is not talking about that, but one is during the sadhana dasa, one is trying to talk about a mode of life in which all our activities, mental and physical and whatever, are guided by, are informed by that supreme truth, is the key guiding principle. So you would be everywhere, but you would be nowhere. You would be doing kind of role play, but you are all the time aware of your own atmata. You're swastha all the time. Atmanistitaha. You're constantly meditating on the self. So, as Sri Aurobindo says beautifully at one place, all life is yoga. The whole life is a prayer or a meditation in that sense. Then he says, Sa gunan samatitya etan etan samatitya, comprehensively having overcome etan gunan brahma bhuyaya kalpyate. He now sort of reaches there. Therefore, he's saying here is Brahmana Paramatmana hi Yasman Pratishtha Aham, that Paramatma. Here he's saying the Brahman is Sopadika Sabikalpa Brahma, Sabikalpaka. Because there are a lot of adjectives you are using here. Shankaracharya is saying Yasmat Pratishtha Aham Pratishthitam. And he's saying, I am Lord Krishna, I am actual that Nirakara Brahman. You are not being able to see it, and Madhusudana Saraswati will even beautifully explain it with much more detail. We'll go there. So what he's saying, Jasmat Pratishtha Aham Pratitishthati. Asmin iti pratishta aham pratyagatma. I am that atma, pratyagatma, which is also in you and me, that pratyagatma, because he's appearing there in what form? Because that Jiva Brahma Aikya, he's just making the foundation stone of all spiritual practice. So the Brahman, that ultimate Brahman, is verily the Pratyagatma, but that Pratyagatma which is completely Suddha, is completely Gunatita, and therefore he's saying that is here. Kidrisasya Brahmana, what kind of Brahman is that? Shankaracharya is explaining. I'll tell you what Brahman I'm talking about. He's saying Amritasya, that Brahman that you have heard so far from me, my dear friend, which is Amrita, not mortal, it's not going to die. Avinasinaha. So it's not going to have Vinasa Prapti. It's ultimately free from all modifications. It's Niskriya, it's Nirguna, it's Avinasi. And then he adds, Avyayasya, na Vyeti. You remember earlier he says, Atma is that one where there is no Vyaya of it. It doesn't undergo any modifications. So he says Avyayasya means Avikarinaha. It's not a Vikari. What is Vikari? The gunas are Vikaras. And what has happened to the sadhaka? He has become gunatita. Therefore, Bhagavan is saying the Brahman that he's talking about is beyond these gunas and he's avikari because he's beyond the gunas. And then saswatasya. And what is saswata? Nityasya dharmasya dharma jnanasya. Now, this Brahman is also Jnana Rupa that we know. It's not a being, it's not a chair, it's not a table, it's not a Swargaloka, it's not Vishnu Bhagavan with Nama Rupa. It is actually verily knowledge because that Brahma Jnana, when we have, we do not have anymore the tripartite division in the realm of consciousness. As I know, this is the process of knowing, this is my Dheya Vastu. But there will be only Dheya Vastu. The Brahman will sort of, it will be all over the place. It's like the river enters the ocean. It's just an example, okay? Don't try to equate every aspect of the example of what is being exemplified or what is being pointed at. Now, the river gets into the ocean. Then the river is all over the ocean, isn't it? So that ocean is all over the river. The river is no more visible in that sense. Similarly, when that knowledge, because that is the only thing, neha nanasti kinchana, and therefore, when that wisdom, when that sarvatmaka chetana overwhelms, you remember that when there is ocean all over, you no more are looking for a well to take a bath. And he has mentioned Bhagavan earlier. Similarly, when a person gets moksha, is no more bothered about any particular benefit of the jnana or karma or anything, because whatever benefits you're talking about, it's all there. Okay. So he's saying dharmasya dharma jnanasya jnana yoga dharma prapyasya. That is what I was saying. That the sadhya is being referred to as sadhana. So um, if a boy, if you're there's a guy, he wants to get into the army, and then his son is busy to get into the army. That means he has to sit in different examinations like CDS and stuff like that. He's preparing for it, or maybe civil services in India, civil services. So he's preparing for it. So what is the goal of his son? If somebody is, what is your daughter or son doing? What should the father say? My son or daughter is preparing to get into the IAS or the civil services or the Indian Army or Indian Air Force. That is what he's supposed to say. What does he say? What is your son doing? He says he's into competitives. And what is a competitive? Competitive is actually an examination. It's a selection process. And then he gets a job. What does the father say? He got the competitive. But what is the competitive? It's an examination. So the sadhya, the destination, is being described by the method of reaching there. In that way, here, Brahman is being referred to as dharma. In what way? Jnana yoga, that is the name of that dharma. That is the discipline. It's not the karma kanda, because karma kanda is only for if you do it without phalaprapti asha, that is for antakarana shuddhi, for purification, for flushing out all the tamasic things and stuff like that. So, Jnana Yoga Dharma Praptyasya, you get that Brahman through Jnana Yoga. And if you do Jnana Yoga, there is Ajnana Nibriti. There is the Purva faulty understandings are slowly erased out. The computer is formatted, the internal computer. And then the truth becomes evident itself. That's your name. Sukha, and then that Sukhasya. And that is that ultimate thing. Sukhasya. Ananda Rupasya, that Brahman is verily Sachidananda Ananda Rupasya. Aikantikasya, why it's called Aikantika? Avyabhicharinaha Amritadi Swabhavasya. Now, a person who has done a lot of bhakti yoga, he has done the jnana sadhana and nishkama karma and upasana and everything, but here what Bhagavan is saying is that Amritadi Swabhavasya, who has overcome these gunas and his sama sukha dukkha, tulya ninda stuti, and he's having upakaris or apakaris, he's equally kind and compassionate, that kind of a person, Paramananda Rupasya. And this Brahman now is being referred to as Amritadi Swabhavasya, means Amrita, Saswata, Abhyaya, Adi Swabhava. Actually, these words are just being mentioned because the Brahman is Nirvishesha. There is no description for it. But for our Manda Buddhi, we need to use these words. That is the only key to understanding this. Amritadi Swabhavasya Brahmanaha, of the Brahman, Paramananda Rupasya, and that Brahman is also Paramananda Rupa, Tasya Paramatmanaha, of that Paramatma, who is the foundation for reaching there, Pratyagatma. So this particular Pratyagatma, when we have removed that Sakhi Chaitanya, this very Pratyagatma is the foundation, Shankaracharya is saying, and he's saying it very beautifully because he says if you do not pay heed to it, you're not going to anyway, because this is the beginning of the whole sadhana, and this is the termination of all sadhana. Because once you sort of realize there is no difference between the Param Brahman so-called and you, that is just one truth, and we all are a part of it. Are we part of it as individuals or our qualities or gunas? No. It's Suddha Satta Swarupa in that sense. And this is Samyak Jnanena Paramatmataya Nishchiyate. So how do you reach there? Samyak Jnanena, with comprehensive, all encompassing. That Sarvatmaka Chitta Vritti, where you identify Sarvam Vasudeva Miti and all the Jnanas are. It's very easy to mention. All of us read and we mention that. But what he's hinting is the genuine state in which, after a lot of sadhana, the mind becomes so pure that the sadhaka is sort of there, and the very presence is mentioned that when the real Advaitavadi walks in the street, even the birds and animals feel a sense of relief. They feel the impact of that love because his very presence is an embodiment of love, is an embodiment of light and bliss, because he's there all the time. When he eats, everybody eats. That's what is mentioned in the Upanishad. When he eats, everybody eats. That is the kalpana. Just imagine how serious he is in his own sadhana, and absolutely individual is nowhere. And then he's saying, Samyak jnanena paramatmaya nishchiyate tad etad brahma bhuyaya kalpate. That is what is mentioned in the verse number 26, just the previous verse. Iti uttamaya cha ishvara sakya bhaktanugrahadi prayojanaya brahma pratishtite pravartite sa sakti brahmaiva aham. And he's saying, now, for example, the bhaktas are not capable of understanding all these complex Vedantic secrets or these ideas. Yaya Ishvara Saktya, Yaya cha Ishvara Saktya, and by that Ishvara Sakti, with the help of which, so Bhakta Anugrahati Prayojanaya, Bhagavan wants to sort of benefit. He wants to give that grace, Ishvara Prasada, in order to elevate the souls who are looking for liberation. Brahma Pratishtha iti pravartate. And then Bhagavan to motivate, because Bhagavan, Krishna is to Bhagavan Swayam, he is Paramatma himself, and he is educating Arjuna. So he wants to sort of motivate him to understand this deep secret. Arjuna might get confused, and Madhusudana will deal with it. He'll ask that question, he'll deal with it. So Bhagavan sort of clarifies, Sa Sakti Brahma Eva Aham. That particular thing, I am that Brahman. Sakti Sakti Matoho Anyanyatvat iti Abhipraya. Now, the Sakti and Saktiman is always one, isn't it? The electric bulb and the electricity, with the help of which that bulb is luminous, cannot be separated. And that is what Bhagavan is there. And then he's making an alternative interpretation in order to sort of make it easier for people to understand. Okay. So that in order to make it easier, he's saying what in the next one. So, and then he says, Aham eva nanya pratishtha asya tasya brahmanaha nirvikalpaga. Now he's saying that this Brahman is sabvikalpaga Brahman that I'm talking about, because there are few adjectives. And this particular Lord Krishna that I am in front of you, of course, I have an appearance. So Bhagavan, he says that you have to understand Mama Maya Duratya. And I'm verily that nirvikalpaka Brahman. Aham eva na anya pratishtha ashraya. Kim visisasya amritasya अमरणधर्मकस्य अव्ययस्य व्यवहि व्ययरहितस्य. And then I am this pratishtha, I am the foundation of that sasvata avyaya, right? That particular, these are the ways in which you have defined that Brahman, and therefore that is Savikalpa, and I am that pratishtha, I am the foundation of that. किंच शाश्वतस्य च नित्यस्य धर्मस्य ज्ञाननिष्ठालक्षणस्य सुखस्य तज्जनितस्य एकांतिकस्य एकांतनियतस्य च. And then he sort of is saying, because Brahma Bhuyaya Kalapatya, and this particular thing will be elaborated further by Madhusudana Saraswati. He's saying that Mukhya, it's you're going to get it only through me. So you have to do that Ananya, Ananya Bhakti. It's very important. Avyavachari Bhakti. It's very, very important. Pratishtha ahamiti vartate iti Srimad Paramahansa Parivrajagacharyasya Sri Govinda Bhagavat Pujya Pada Sisyasya Srimad Sankara Bhagavatah Kritau Srimad Bhagavad Gita Bhasye Chaturdaso Adhyayah. These are Sankara Bhasya sort of comes to an end, and I think we can now sort of choose to go back to our Madhusudana Saraswati. And just give me 1 second. The sound thing is creating a little problem though. Okay. Now let's look at the verse number 27 from the Madhusudana Saraswati. I don't have to look at the computer screen, so it's easier. Brahmana tat padavachyasya. He's now differentiating. There is one Brahman about who is Bhagavan is talking about. Brahma Bhuyaya Kalpate, he has mentioned this. And tat padavachya. We have some words to describe it. Sopadhikasya. Once you have a word, because he's nameless and formless. So the moment you say Brahman, or you are having some description of him as Amrita, Abhya, all that, he becomes Upadhi. You are mentioning with certain names and titles, names and forms. So he becomes Sopadhikasya. That is how he mentions it. Right? And then how he explains it, it's like this. Jagat Utpati Sthiti Laya Hetuha. And that Brahman, which is Jagat Utpati Sthiti and Laya Hetu. Remember, that ultimate thing, the Nirvishesha Brahman, is not cause of anything, not effect of anything. It is always there. Because you don't talk about any Srushti or Laya and Pralaya. These things become real to us because we are in Ajnana Dasa. Okay? It's like this. So there's because there's so much of I read a very nice story, so I'm talking about it. There's a friend of mine, a retired, very senior bureaucrat, who has written a very, very heart-touching story. I just read it yesterday. That apparently he has two daughters. The elder one is very fair-skinned and cute. The younger one is even more cute, but she's a little dull-skinned. Okay, and because she's a dull-skinned, a lot of people used to sort of even address her as if she's, using those racial terms, saying very dark, kalu, or stuff like that, and she used to have a lot of mental problems. Then he says that when she went to Europe to pursue her higher studies, in fact, she was very appreciated for looks because people were not looking at her skin, they were looking at her looks. And she's a beautiful girl. Now he mentions there's a statement that in India, people seem to differentiate between who is fair, who is dark, but actually, when they go to Europe, the so called fair person who is an Indian and the so called dark person who is an Indian, once you are in Europe, I mean, you just all of you are black. You just a shade brighter. That's it. But so far, there, white people are concerned. For them, it's just dark, right? So they just rather distinguish between the facial contours and your behavior and how do you present yourself, how do you behave, and how sweet or cute you are to like or dislike you. However, at the level of a particular South Asian or any particular place where you have a range of colors of human beings, you might feel good or bad depending thinking that you're light skin or you're dark skin. But actually people might just look at you and say, yeah, he's a dark person, he's a black person. That's it. Right? Similarly, in the Ajnana Rasa, when we have this Ajnana Rasa, we are differentiating and we are describing X, Y, Z, all these things are there, right? But ultimately, all of it becomes delusional, becomes a lie once a person is that level of self knowledge. He is no different from God, they are saying. This is the highest way one can praise the religious aspiration of a sadhaka who is on a religious journey, a spiritual journey, because he's saying that there is no God, there is no human, there is no world. What is there? There is pure consciousness. This is the most exalted dream that one can ever have to reach at the end of his journey or her journey. Now, this Jagat Utpatti Sthiti Laya Hetu, that there is a particular thing. Who is he? He is that Ishvara. The Srashta, we know that Bhagavan says in the beginning of this chapter that I, sort of lay the foundation of the creation of this universe by he literally says that I sort of start the process of insemination by creating that Hiranya Garabha, the Sutratma, the Brahma, who creates this samsara. And how do I do it? I mean, he's saying that I use my Maya, that's my own energy. And it's like Garbha Dhana. I'm trying to sort of impregnate it and establish that particular thing, the root of the creation, the Vija, the seed for this whole creation, in the in that embryo of that particular creative energy called Maya. That's what he says in the beginning of this verse, in this chapter. So Jagat Utpatti Sthitilaya Hetu, that is the Upadhi. So it is a Sopadhika Brahma. Hetoha Pratishtha, I am the Hetu of that Hetu. He's not saying I'm the cause anymore, but he's saying I am the foundation. That means what? The Ishvara, out of which the Sansara is created, the God of all the Semitic religions and the gods of Hinduism or any other thing. Where are they all standing? In that ultimate thing. What is that? That foundational truth. Satta Matra. Who is that? It's me. And by the way, if you open your eyes, that's also you. Because it's because of ignorance that we are looking at ourselves as limited and inferior and miserable. That's what Bhagavan says. Siddhi hetoha pratishtha paramarthikam nirvikalpakam. And there is absolutely no alternative. Satchidanandatmakam nirupadikam tadpada laksham aham. So this tat has two levels. One is sopadika, one is nirupadika. So the nirupadika Brahman is that Lord Krishna who is standing and talking to Arjuna, right? It's a contradiction in terms, isn't it? You'd say that he's a guy speaking, he has a name and a form, is speaking. It's just a human being. And then you're saying he's the nirupadika Brahman, who is the foundation for the creator of the whole universe. How funny is that? But one has to really understand what is being meant here. Because the consciousness that we hold, we are a very limited human being, we are not God. But the Upanishad says that Brahmavid Brahmeva Bhavati, you verily become non different from the creation, the fundamental principle which in a way guides this whole process of appearance of this creation. You reach there. That means what? You essentially get rid of all the names and forms. You get rid of all the stains and all the ideas that limit and temper the possibility of we establishing ourselves as Sachidananda Swarupa, verily non-different from the God. This whole cause of this whole universe, the root of this whole universe, that is that Satta Swarupa, that is that Brahman who says that. Tatpadalakyam aham nirvikalpo vasudevaha. That is Vasudevam Sarvamiti in that sense, not that, Vasurivadak Vasudevaha. Pratitishthati atra iti pratishtha. I am pratishtha because he is here. Verily I am present here. I am present everywhere. Pratishtha. Kalpita rupa rahitam akalpitam rupam. I am that akalpita where all names and forms are imagined, but I am verily without any names and forms. That Bhagavan is verily saying. We are free to love Lord Krishna with that beautiful smiling face, with his beautiful flute and his smile, words of wisdom, and all that. That's kids' play. That is the beginning. But once we are there, once we have the energy, then he reveals to us his secret truth, where there'll be no names and forms. There'll be no Lord Krishna with that particular thing. He'll be all over. I mean, that pure truth is going to eat us up. We don't even exist. There'll be only that truth. That means we are going to be that truth. That courage we should have, and we have to purify ourselves, because we're going to be verily no different from Lord Krishna that we worship. I mean, that is the ultimate destination that we are setting for ourselves. And then he says, Nirupadikam Tatpadalakshana Nirvikalpa Vasudeva Pratisthitati Atra Pratishtha Kalpita Rupa Rahitam Akalpitam Rupam Ataha Yo Mam Anupadikam. That means Nirupadikam, without name and form. Brahma Sevate, the one meditates on that Param Brahman. Sa Brahma Bhuyaya Kalpate Iti Yuktam Eva. Therefore, what I said in the previous verse is not to frighten you. Please accept that is fundamentally real. Kidrisasya Brahmana Pratishtha Aham Iti Akankhyayam Viseshanani. What kind of Brahman of which you are the foundation? Therefore, he's explaining Amritasya Vinasa Rahitasya. I'll just read it because we have just discussed that in Sankaravasya. Avyayasya Viparinama Rahitasya. Avya Viparinama, right? Modification of the body. Jayate, Asti, Bardhate, Viparinamate, right? Modification of the body. You have, you grow taller after some time, you grow laterally, add fat, and become a little less attractive as you were in the youth. Then apakhyate vinasyati. Viparinamarahitasya saswatasya apakshayarahitasya. Why saswata? Because once we are sort of middle-aged, we have to leave grown up man, and then slowly the body shrinks, the height shrinks, and we have a few diseases and non-communicable diseases very often, diabetes or maybe heart problem, cholesterol, and all that. Dharmasya jnananishta lakshana dharma prapyasya, same as what Bhagavan Sankaracharya says, where the destination is described by the method of reaching there, that is dharma. Sukhasya paramananda rupasya, because that is Sachidananda thing. Sukhasya Vishaya Indra Sanyogatvam Varayati. Why he's talking about Ekantika Sukha? I had mentioned that Madhusudana Saraswati will beautifully explain it, and he does. He's saying Vishaya Indriya Sanyogatvam. Now, you might think that when we have a rasgulla, we have a chocolate, or we have a cake, aren't we feeling good? So, is the Brahma Prapti like that? No. He adds one adjective to rule out the possibility of our confusing whatever happiness we might describe our sense pleasure as. That is not that particular sukha that we have in mind. We are having that happiness which is ekantikasya avivicharinaha sarvasmin dese kale cha vidyamanasya ekantika sukha rupasya ityarthaha. If we have Vishaya Indriya Sanyoga Janya Sukha, so far the Vishaya is connected. In fact, if you connect too long with that particular Vishaya, it could be a good picture, it could be a very good hotel, it could be a lovely riverside, it could be a very good sea beach. And if you stay there for 5 days, 10 days, 15 days, you might feel irritated. You might feel bored. You would like to go away from that place, right? But imagine about that happiness, which you can hold on to an experience irrespective of the physical location and the time, desa kala, sarva, desa, sarvasmin, desa kale cha vidyamanasya, and it's everywhere there. That is why that sukha is different. That sukha is not sapeksha, it's nirepeksha, and therefore that is atyantika niritisaya sukha etadrisasya brahmanaha yasmad aham vastavam surupam. I am that ultimate truth of that. Tasmad madhavaktaha sansarat muchyate iti bhava. And therefore, my devotees kind of get liberated from this sansara. Tatha cha uktam brahmana bhagavatam Sri Krishnam prati. So Brahma, Lord Brahma is kind of worshipping Lord Krishna and he's saying what? Ekatvamatma Purusha Purana Satya Swayam Jyoti Ananta Adyah Nityo Khyarojasra Sukha Niranjanaha Purno Dvayo Mukta Upadhita Mritaha Ekaha Tu Tvam Atma, you are one. He's addressing Lord Krishna. Ekaha Tvam Atma Purushaha Puranaha. Purana means Nitya. We have known that. Anadi Ananta, that Purana word is used. Satya, that means you are not an imagined thing. Swayam Jyotihi, you are not an object, you are not Jada that somebody is declaring your presence, you are Swaprakasa. Anantaha, there's no end to it. Adyaha, actually it's Anadi Anantaha, but Adyaha is just mentioned, this is an Upadhi, saying you are the root of everything. Nityaha, perennial, eternal. Akshara, there is no Vyati, Abhyaya, Akshara, there is no Vikara in you. Ajasra Sukha, I mean, you get limitless happiness, you embody limitless happiness. Niranjanaha, there is no malinata, there is no stain or anything, there is no ajnana, there is no papa, nothing. And then what he says, Purna Advaya, there is no two, and you are Punna Madha Punna Idam, you are the whole thing, you are the whole of the universe. Punna, there's nothing outside of you. Purnaha Advayaha Muktaha. And there's nothing which sort of limits it, sets any limitations on you. There's no conditionalities which bind you. Upa and muktaha upadhitaha. You are beyond all names and forms. Yeah, the mukta is not independent to be made sense of. It's mukta upadhitaha. You are free from all names and forms. And therefore, you're amritaha. You're immortal. That is how Atra Saropadi Sunya Atma Brahma Tvam Ityarthaha. So he is giving certain Smriti Purana that Bhagavan was, Lord Krishna was himself referred to by Brahma as that ultimate Param Brahma. And that is what Bhagavan is saying here. In case somebody may have a few doubts in the mind, why should Lord Krishna at all dare to say that he is the Param Brahma, the foundation of the Sopadika Brahman? The Ishvara, he is verily the foundation. Is it not egotism? End of the day, he looked like a human being. He's standing in front of a war field, the war field of life, in which he's giving a few words of counsel to a very confused but a very respectful Arjuna with loads of energy and loads of vairagya. No, he doesn't. He's not egoistic at all. He's the pure self itself taking a certain name and a form for the benefit of we bhaktas. And then he said, Sukena api stutim antirena eva uktam, and then Shuka, the son of Vyasa, who sort of teaches Parikshita, Srimad Bhagavatam. And he also says the same thing. Sarvesam eva vastunam bhavartho bhavati stitaha tasyapi bhagavan krishnaha kim atad vastu rupyatam. Sarvesam eva vastunam. All the things that you see in this whole universe, Bhavartho bhavati stitaha. He is the very thing, all their existence. He is the foundation. Tasyapi Bhagavan Krishna. And what is that particular thing? That's Upadik Brahma. And of that, what causes the existence and the management and the sustainability of this whole universe that we see is something which is the foundation of all that. And what is that? That invisible, subtle, most powerful, nameless, formless substructure or foundation is actually Bhagavan Krishna. Kim atadvastu rupyatam, what to talk about anything other than that. Atad. Tad is that Bhagavan Krishna. So kim atad vastu rupyatam. Sarvesam eva karya vastunam bhavartha satta rupaha. That existence satta rupaha. Paramartho bhavati karyakarena jayamane sopadhika brahmani stitah. So all these, like for example, if you look at a pot, where does the pot stay? It's in the clay, because the karya doesn't have any independent existence other than its cause. It's like a golden necklace, it's verily gold. In that sense, all of us exist in that sopadhika Brahman, which has created us, and that sopadhika Brahman is being held by the Param Brahma, which is named and formless, which is Lord Krishna. It's a contradiction because I'm immediately saying Lord Krishna because Bhagavan Krishna is saying here. But we have to see and understand and comprehend the inner meaning of it. Tasyapi bhavatah karanasya sopadhikasya brahmanah bhavartah satta rupa artho Bhagavan Krishna sopadhikasya nirupadhike kalpitatvad. Because whenever you have something sopadhika, like for example a snake, where is it imagined? Where is it superimposed? In the rope. So that Nirupadika Brahman is verily presented by Lord Krishna here. That's what is being indicated. Kalpitasya cha adhisthana anatirekad. The snake cannot be different from the rope. So far the rope is there, we can see the snake. But once the rope is taken away, would you see the snake there? If Brahman is there, we can imagine the samsara. Without Brahman, no samsara. Why? Where is the foundation? If there is a foundation, then only we can have the samsara. And that is the Brahman. And then कल्पितस्य च अधिष्ठान अनतिरेकात् भगवतः कृष्णस्य सर्वकल्पना कल्पना अधिष्ठानत्वेन. And Bhagavan Lord Krishna is the adhisthana, the foundation of all the imaginations in the form of names and forms. That is the very samsara. Paramartha Satya Nirupadi Brahma Swarupatvad. And he is that Satya, he's that ultimate truth. He is the Nirupadika Brahman. Ataha Kim Atadavastu Tasmad Sri Krishnad Anyadavastu Paramarthikam Kim Nirupatya. Can I ever try to define anything other than Lord Krishna as Paramarthika? Because he's the foundation of all foundations. He's the cause of all causes. He's the truth of all truths. That is what is Lord Krishna. And Paramarthikam na anyat kimapi iti arthaha. What is Paramarthika? Parama artha. That is why saying there is no other way you can make sense of it. There is nothing else, no attributions, nothing. It's ultimate thing. Tad etad yahapi yuktam brahmano hi pratishtha ahamitin. Therefore, Bhagavan Krishna is saying, I am the foundation of that Sopadika Brahma out of which will the samsara is created. Athava. He's giving another interpretation like Bhagavan Shankaracharya did for the benefit of us. What does he say? Athava tvada bhakta so tvada bhavam aptum. So, for example, this Bhagavan, that Brahma Bhava Aptum. Nama katham nu Brahma Bhavaya kalpate Brahmana sakasat tava anyatvad ityasankya Brahmano iti. Because Bhagavan says the one who worships me is going to get Brahma Bhava. Did he say that? He said it. He will get the Brahma Bhava. Who worships me? I mean, I worship you and I will get Brahma Bhava. Why shouldn't I worship Brahman directly? If I get you, how do I get Brahman? Somebody might get confused. Brahmana Paramatmana Pratishtha Paryapti Aham Eva Natu Tad Bhinna Brahma Ityartha. My dear friend, are you getting confused that by focusing on Lord Krishna, you're going to miss out on Param Brahma? You will not get moksha? Don't you think like that? Because I am the foundation of that very Brahman about which the Brahma Sutras, the Upanishads, I'm the foundation. I'm the ultimate truth of all the truths that you study in the Upanishads and the Puranas, any other book that you pick up on spirituality. I'm that ultimate secret, the truth. So get hold of me. And how do you get hold of me? Ananya Bhaktya, having that devotion without any alteration, without any deviation, without any laws of attention. Tatha amritasya amritatvasya mokshasya. Amritasya, he's now reinterpreting, saying that amrita could also refer to that moksha, that ultimate liberation. Cha avyayasya, and that moksha, you are not going to have punaragamana. So it's also avyaya, because once you are there, there is no, you are not slighted anymore. You don't lose the freedom you get once. It's not like partial pregnancy or partial liberation. you get a full liberation. Abhyasya sarvatha anuchedyasya, and that particular moksha, that is anuchedya, you cannot separate it, you cannot limit it, saying that no, he's got moksha, but he has scored 9.7. The other one scores 8.7. It's nothing like that. So, and that Atma is anuchedyasya pratishtha aham eva. I am that. I am the foundation. Mai eva moksha paravasito mata prapti reva moksha ityartha. You get me, you get moksha, right? And that's how it's simple as that. Tatha sasvatasya nitya moksha phalasya. That is also eternal liberation you're getting. Dharmasya jnana nishta lakshanasya. Dharmasya means dharma prapyasya. You get there through the jnana sadhana lakyasya. So paryapti ahameva. I am the ultimate destination. Reach me. Jnana nishta lakshano dharma mayeva paryavasito na tena madvina kinchit prapyam ityartha. There's nothing else that you should ever dream or fancy of reaching other than me. You get me, you get everything. It's up to you. Tatha ekantikasya, and therefore, because that sukha is not for 5 hours or 5 minutes, it's sarvada, sarvasmin kale, and sarvasmin dese, all time, all locations. Why? Because there's no time and location once you reach there. You are everywhere. So sukhasya sa paryapti aham eva paramananda rupatvat, because I am that ultimate bliss. Na madhinnam kinchit sukham prapyam asti ityartha. Other than me, there's nothing else that you're looking for. Bhagavan is saying that I'm just love myself. You don't have to love me, just be myself, reach me, and you experience everything. Tasmad yuktam eva uktam mad bhakto brahma bhuyaya kalpate iti. It's not words of arrogance, egotism. I'm just telling the last final secret after discussing with you very complicated truths in the chapter 13, then before that in 7, 8, and 9. And I'm just holding your hand and leading you through different channels and staircases, bringing you closer to me. And that is how he sort of brings this to an end. And he says, Parakritana madabandham param brahma narakritihi. This particular thing which done by this para, this avidya, and by this whole sanskaras and all, that madbandha, that this particular chains which are getting weakened, Param Brahma Narakriti, who has taken the human form before me, Lord Krishna, Saundarya Sara Sarvaswam, Sarvaswam, and is the embodiment, all beauty and bliss and everything. Bande Nandat Madam Mahaha. I'm worshipping Lord Krishna. That's how Madhusudana Saraswati beautifully concludes this. But we have sort of crossed the time by a couple of minutes. I was thinking that I'll try to summarize, but you remember what we did in this whole chapter. We did this whole Srishti Prakriya. Bhagavan again sort of repeated how the whole Srishti has happened. That the Brahman, he is verily Brahman, and he is the father of all, and he has sort of created the creator, the mythological creator Hiranyagarbha, and having created him, he has set in motion this whole process of creation. And then you have these three gunas, and he has explained what is the nature of these three gunas and how they bind us. Okay, if I can briefly sort of look at them again briefly, he sort of says jnana and sukha is sattva, and dukkha is this the rajas, right? And Krishna, and you have this prabriti, arambha, and karmasa, and all that, and spriha, and moha, jnana, pramada, right? So these are the tendencies that are associated with moha, these tamas, and then if you do sattvika thing, you might go to Brahmaloka, or you will go to Swargaloka, you will do a lot of punya karmas, auspicious rebirth, jnana sadhana for liberation, that will be a preparatory stage to sattvika life. If you have rajas, you'll be reborn in an appropriate condition where you can pick up wherever you have left, depending on your responsibilities, your adhikaras, your eligibility, as per your qualifications. The mudha yoni, that means one will go down. What is that? Reborn as animals or as human beings, very close to an animal living standard. And if you have sattvika, you have nirmala phala, jnana, and you just go up, and urdham gachanti, sattvastha, and then madhyam tishtanti, they stay in the middle, the rajasaha, they will in the manushya loka, and adagachanti, this tamasaha. So this is how he has mentioned about this, the whole truth. and the markers and everything. We have discussed that at length. So now we'll start and ultimately saying that there are two aspects of it, that we have to understand the interplay of gunas, hold ourselves, and to be able to hold ourselves and transcend the gunas, there is one critical element there that Bhagavan mentions, and that critical element is that we need to steadfastly focus on devotion to that ultimate principle, that Paramatma, that Lord Krishna, as he mentioned, that you have to constantly think of me and meditate on me, then it's much easier for you to not only overcome the gunas, but also get that ultimate liberation. And don't think about anything. Then Sansyatma Pranashati, he has alerted us earlier. So we'll stop our discussions today. We'll start the 15th chapter from tomorrow onwards. So let's do the Santi mantras. I'll put an end to the YouTube, and yeah, if you have any questions, you can ask me in the Google Meet.